welcome to this YouTube channel dedicated to the teachings of St. Thomas Aquinas and the Summa Theologica. My name is Dave Palmer, and thank you for joining me for this video, which I think you're going to find very interesting because it is asking the question, why in the Summa Theologica does St. Thomas Aquinas explain that sex outside of marriage is a sin? In fact, he's going to say it is a mortal sin, so we'll get right to it. And by the way, if you're looking for this in the Summa, it's in Secunda Secundae, which is the second part of the Summa, and it's in question 154, Article 2. It falls under the Cardinal Virtues, it falls under Temperance, and then the questions about lust, and this particular question 154 is about the various parts of lust. It's a very interesting part of the Summa. Okay, so what if a man and a woman fall in love and they really love each other and they're committed and they are in it for the long haul, but they're not going to get married, but they still want to have sexual relationship with each other? What's the big problem with that? And how is that different from this couple who actually goes and gets married and formalizes the marriage with a vow? What's the big deal, and why does St. Thomas Aquinas have a problem with the first and not the second having sexual relations? Well, that's what we're going to talk about in this teaching. So Thomas, in question 154, Article 3, says whether simple fornication is a mortal sin. Now, fornication is just another word for sex outside of the bond of marriage. And so he says in the corpus of this article, he says, without any doubt, we must hold simple fornication to be a mortal sin. In order to make this evident, we must take note that every sin committed directly against human life is a mortal sin. So now you got to ask yourself, okay, when a man and a woman who love each other come together and consensually have sexual relations, and even if they're, they say they're bound for life, well, who's the human being that is being, offended or violated here, right? You may be surprised because it's not the man or the woman that's involved in this particular bond. He goes on to say, now, simple fornication implies an inordinateness that tends to injure the life of the offspring to be born of this union. So he is concerned about the baby, the potential baby in this union. For we find in all animals where the upbringing of the offspring needs care of both male and female, that these come together not indeterminately, but the male with a certain female, whether one or several, such is the case with all birds. While on the other hand, among those animals where the female alone suffices for the upbringing, the union is indeterminate, as in the case of dogs and like animals. So Thomas, like Aristotle, is saying, okay, we look at nature, we see different types of animals and the way that they mate and the way that they bond. Some animals do bond for life, and there's a male and a female. Some don't. Okay, so he's saying, okay, sometimes it's not a union for life, sometimes it is. What does that have to do with human beings? He says, now it is evident that the upbringing of a human child requires not only the mother's care for the nourishment, but much more, he says, the care of his father as a guide and guardian, and under whom he progresses in good, both internal and external. Hence, human nature rebels against an indeterminate union of the sexes and demands that a man should be united to a determinate woman and should abide with her as a long time or even for a whole lifetime. Now that sometimes confuses people, and he's saying, well, why for a long time or a lifetime? Well, I think that might have to do with perhaps somebody dying, or maybe there was even back then the issue of annulments, or I don't know what he's getting at there. But basically, marriage is forever, and there is no divorce in the Catholic Church, of course. There are annulments, but that's another video, right? Hence it is that in the human race, the male has a natural solicitude for the certainty of offspring, because on him devolves the upbringing of the child, and this certainly would cease if the union of sexes were indeterminate. And so I think this is great. Here, 13th century St. Thomas Aquinas, the doctor of the Catholic Church, is talking about the necessity for a father, the necessity, and that's sometimes even in the 21st century, that's kind of thrown out like men are unnecessary. he certainly did not agree. All right, this union with a certain definite woman is called matrimony, which for the above reason is said to belong to the natural law. All right, so matrimony, one man, one woman, natural law. I did a whole video about natural law previously. Since, however, the union of the sexes is directed to the common good of the whole human race, and common goods depend on the law for their determination, it follows that this union of man and woman, which is called matrimony, is determined by some law. So now he's saying that this needs to be, enshrined in law. This needs to be something that, because it's a benefit to society, to the culture, that this is something that needs to be taken very seriously, right? Wherefore, since fornication is an indeterminate union of the sexes as something incompatible with matrimony, it is opposed to the good of the child's upbringing, and consequently, it is a mortal sin. I think that makes a lot of sense. Now he's going to go on in this next part and say, well, what about the man who is totally committed to the woman, and they're going to be together for life, and they have every intention of raising this child together. What's wrong with that? Why does it have to be matrimony? Why does, and he says, nor does it matter if a man having knowledge of a woman, which is sex, by fornication makes sufficient provision for the upbringing of the child. So he's going to pay for the child, and he's going to be there for the child, right? Because a matter that comes upon the determination of the law is judged according to what happens in general and not according to what may happen in a particular case. So he's saying, yeah, sure, every now and then you might get a man who's going to be there for the whole life, and he's going to take care of the kid, and he's going to be there, and there's going to be a father in the home. But he said that's a particular case. Generally speaking, couples that don't get married are not as committed to each other, and so we need to have marriage, and so therefore any relations outside of marriage is going to be a sin. So just to kind of recap here, why is there a difference between the couple on the right and the couple on the left? Why is marriage so important? St. Thomas Aquinas comes down and saying it's because of the baby, because the baby depends on the couples being committed to each other, the couple being committed to each other enough to go and get married. And that, I think, makes a lot of sense. This is St. Thomas Aquinas forever, for everyone, I should say. Thanks for joining me. God bless you.